If you're considering a career in medicine, this show is for you. I'm going to be talking to a variety of healthcare professionals who are going to share the reality of what it takes to have a successful career in medicine. The good, the bad, the inspiring, the funny. My name is Michelle Neske. I'm a physician assistant and your host, about to bring you Beyond the Scope. If you've done research into applying to physician assistant school, you know how crazy it is with all the different requirements, programs out there, and how do you choose which one is best for you? Well, luckily, two of my friends and PAs created an amazing platform that you can do this all in one place called My PA Box. Research schools by state, track your hours, look up all the requirements, literally in one spot at mypabox.com. You can also use their PA school match to enter in all your demographic information, your GPA, whether or not you took the GRE or PA CAT, and filter for schools that would be the best fit for you. You guys, this has been game changing for pre-PAs, and I use it all the time with my clients. You can go ahead and get a 1-year subscription. And because you're listening to this podcast, if you use Posh PA 15, you can get 15% off your 1-year subscription. You will not regret this. If you are a pre-PA, it will sort things out so much for you and just make it easier to do the research on the programs that are the best fit for you. So check them out, mypabox.com. Okay, everybody. Welcome to this, what is going to be an amazing episode of Beyond the Scope. I am talking with Erich Fogg, who is a practicing PA in Maine. And he has many years of experience doing a lot of different things as a PA, which you're going to find out in the next couple of minutes. But just a couple of things. He's a former PA program director, a writer for NCCPA for many years. Has provided a lot of CME opportunities for PAs. So extensive experience, not only clinically, but outside of the clinic as well. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. So Erich, thank you for being here.
Well, Michelle, thank you for having me. It's really great to be here and chat about our great profession. So let's get to it.
Yeah, let's get to it. So really quickly, where did you go to school? What did that look like for you? When did you graduate? And what did you start doing right after graduation?
Yeah, it's a great story. So when I went to undergraduate, I thought maybe medical school. I thought physical therapy, those type of allied. I didn't really know what a PA was back in the early 90s, late 80s, until I was introduced to a PA, came and spoke at one of these career opportunity type of little seminars at the small college I went to in Western Mass. I attended Springfield College in Western Mass. It's a small school, but it does have a claim to fame. It was the birthplace of basketball, so people
there you go
identify that right on the campus. Dr. James Naismith in 1891. It's mandatory you learn everything about basketball if you go to Springfield College. So. But it was after that. And interestingly, Springfield College, at the time that I graduated in 1993, was matriculating its own PA program. So not only was I kind of introduced to the profession, then the college I just attended for the last 4 years was actually getting into it. So this is going to be interesting because I think we're going to talk a little bit about applying to PA school and CASPA and that whole thing. There was no CASPA in 1993. There was about 45 PA programs in the country at the time. Wow. And so as an East Coast New England guy, I definitely was intrigued. I took a year off to get some healthcare experience. We'll talk about that a little bit. But so I applied to all the East Coast schools. So that looked like Northeastern, Yale, Wake Forest, Duke, and Emory University in Atlanta. And got some interviews and kind of went, my interview at Emory was in January. I left a New England snowstorm and flew to Atlanta in January of 94. And when I landed there was a lot of buzz in the city because the Olympics were coming in 96. And it was like 65 degrees in January. I got off the plane. I was like, wait a second. So before I even saw the school, I was like, this Atlanta thing is kind of cool. So long story short, I was lucky enough to be accepted to Emory University. And at the time, the average age of a PA student was probably 35 years old back in the kind of early 90s. And it was definitely a second career choice. So here I was, a 23-year-old guy, just challenged by this applicant pool of all these experienced folks, and lucky enough to get in. And so I went to Emory and graduated in December of 1996. And Atlanta was a great place to go to school. Emory had a phenomenal program. I did a lot of my training in the Grady healthcare system. So like my emergency medicine was at Grady Hospital in downtown Atlanta. It's like the Cook County
awesome.
of Atlanta.
Yeah.
So I got to see and do so much. And interestingly, I learned a couple things, and I know you live in Charleston. So as a New Englander going to school in the South, I learned the difference between a Yankee and a damn Yankee, right? So
yes.
A Yankee goes down, gets their education, comes back north. But I had an opportunity to go work at a critical access hospital in Jackson, Georgia, which is in Butts County, Georgia, which is between Atlanta and Macon, probably a good hour south of Atlanta. And it was like a 6-bed emergency room, critical access. Me and a classmate actually got hired. And gosh, what an immersion experience that was. So I've gone down the rabbit hole a little bit, but so I went to Emory, graduated in the late in 96, and took my first job at the critical access hospital in rural Georgia. So that's how this little New England boy started his career in the Deep South.
So how did you get back up north?
It's a fascinating story. And so we loved Atlanta. My daughter was born in Atlanta. My daughter's a Georgia peach. But we always loved to vacation in Hilton Head, South Carolina, not far from you. Just south of you.
Yeah.
And so in September of 2001 was when we would typically run over the Hilton Head. And so we headed over, and my folks came down from New England to visit us. My daughter at the time was, not even 2 years old yet. And I'll never forget the day. Me and my dad were getting ready to go play golf, because that's what you do in Hilton Head. You play golf or go to the beach. And we're putting on our golf shoes, and these two planes flew into the Twin Towers in New York City. And it was just, for a lot of people, as you know, it was a life-changing event. And so I remember driving back from Hilton Head to Atlanta after that vacation with my wife, and having this conversation about, wow, our world has changed. And there was a desire to get closer to family. My wife was from Connecticut. I was from Massachusetts. And that was it, Michelle. Really, it was a desire to get back close to family, having a young daughter at the time who's now 21. But that's what brought us back, 9/11.
That's awesome. 9/11. I mean, that obviously changed a lot for a lot of us. I remember exactly where I was. I was actually in Boston at that time. Before I went to PA school, I was working at Dana-Farber, and it was definitely an experience in which I can see why you would want to be close to your family. So tell us how you have seen the PA program application process change, because you said, when you applied, there was no CASPA. When I applied, CASPA was still newer. Okay. So I applied in 2003. There was programs that were on CASPA, but I also did a lot of paper apps at that time. And now, here we are with like over 300 PA programs. So how have you seen that change? And how do you think, is it better? Is it more complex? Is it less?
I think it in a general sense, it has to be better. A centralized application service allows like that one-stop shop, no doubt about it. I didn't see that vision when I was applying. It wasn't even quite on the horizon yet. But here's a fun little story about a connection to CASPA. The admissions director at Emory University, when I was accepted, was a PA legend. And to your listeners who don't know this gentleman, you should, because he's one of the pioneers in the profession. But Ted Ruback was the admissions director at Emory University at the time, and was one of the, I mean, I went to Emory because I was lucky to be accepted. It was a great school and all those things. But Ted Ruback was that connection. I had a great interview with him, and I was so enamored by the way he ran his admissions process, and excellent. But what was sad is, so that was in January of 94. When I arrived in August of 94, Ted had taken the program director position out in Oregon. So he was on the move, but he went on to be one of the founding fathers of CASPA. He had a vision of a
Wow, that's
application
cool.
service. So I bumped into Ted several times throughout the years, just through various conferences and whatnot. But so a lot of, I don't know if there's any professional programs now that haven't gone to a centralized application service, right? My daughter just applied to MPH program. She's getting ready to graduate, and they have a centralized application. So I think it's been a positive progression, and I think the PA profession was one of those first to get out there and do that. And for the applicant, like you, I had to call Emory at the time and request, a packet.
Yeah, I had to request it.
Like
yeah, I mean, the internet was very in its infancy back then. So, I mean, I had a dial up. People didn't have like super functional websites, so you had to like call on the phone and be like, can I get an application? You couldn't download it. You had to get it in the mail.
I got a catalog, Michelle, with the graduate schools, and I would flip through them and here's the number that you call for an application.
Wow.
So yes, CASPA has been, I think, a very positive thing for the applicant. I don't know if applicants feel that way, as they go through as they navigate it, because there's a lot to it, and it is complex, and it can be complex, right? So the evolution of that, I think, overall, compared to what it was, I think is better. And again, at the time, back years ago, there was only, less than 100 programs. Now there's, I think by 2023, there'll be 307 is the latest projection I saw from ARC-PA and stuff. So a huge explosion. I can't imagine doing that now individually, right? Going out and plucking applications through it. So that's been a big, I think, a big change that has opened up the opportunity for folks to, at a one-stop shop. Yes, programs require some supplemental stuff here and there that you have to do, but you can at least get well started on your journey to PA school through a centralized application service.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and as you were talking, I thought of two other questions in the fact that there are so many programs popping up. I mean, how do you feel? One of the questions I get a lot is this profession going to be saturated, with all of the programs and all of the, now it being listed as the #1 profession in U.S. News and World Report? Are there going to be jobs? How do you feel about that?
Well, I've been a consultant on a couple startup PA programs, and I won't say which ones, but I remember going to a program that I knew. It was a New England school, and it was long known as a business school. When you went to campus, there were all business buildings and whatnot, and me and some colleagues from other program directors in the country got hired to be a consultant as they were getting ready to launch a PA program. So they brought, like anyone does, bring in a consulting group. How do we do this, right? To help us get started.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember going in to sit down in our introductory meeting with the dean, and I said, before we get started on this, I said, I grew up in New England. I have many friends from high school that went here because it's a business school. You guys are getting you're starting a nursing program, a PA program, a physical therapy. They're getting into the health professions, the allied health.
Yeah.
And I said, what are you doing? And I'll never forget his response. He said, Erich, the business now is healthcare. So as a business school, we're getting into some of the fastest growing professions. And they've gone on to develop a very, very good PA program and a good allied health program. So they built the infrastructure to it. It is a business, and part of my role as being a consultant was the pro forma and the business model to stand up a PA program and how it goes. And they've been really successful. And so to your second question, is there going to be a saturation point? Well, of course, if we continue this way, that is a threat and a possibility. Hey, I'm a hiring manager. I run a service line now at my hospital. I employ about 18 PAs and nurse practitioners. I am 80 miles north of Boston, 40 miles south of Portland, the largest city in the state of Maine. So I'm not in the middle of nowhere. And I have
Right.
several applicants that come to my service line when I post a position who grew up in the area that want to stay in the area. And I know one gal right now that I continue to talk to. She graduated last June from PA school. She hasn't
Hmm.
found a job yet. And so I hear these stories and I wonder a
Hmm.
little bit about that concern, right?
Yeah. Right.
Part of her issue is she wants to stay within this 45-minute kind of radius of
Sure.
where she is.
Yeah.
So that does tie her down. There are jobs out there. We're not at that saturation point yet by any means, but
Yeah.
if you're looking to narrow in on a certain part of the country and a certain kind of discipline that you want to work in, there could be some challenges. When I graduated from PA school, I had 10 job offers without applying to any,
Right.
I
Right.
don't think that that's the case anymore.
Yeah, I don't, it's hard now too, especially over the last year with the pandemic. Obviously, things are very different. When I graduated, I took a job off rotation that I loved. But there were other jobs, and there were a lot of jobs. And so I wonder how this will evolve, after the pandemic, going forward. Are we going to see another sort of big opening, or are we going to wind up in this situation where there are less jobs? And I think just time will tell us that. But I do think that you're right. Like, if you want to be in a certain area of the country, or you have to be in, that's when it becomes definitely more challenging. If you're really honing in on a certain specialty, I feel like that makes it a little bit more challenging too. And so now you were a PA program director, and I think a lot of the listeners on here would want to know, when you're looking at applicants, what are the most important components of a successful applicant, but also a successful student? Because
Right.
what I try to explain to people sometimes is, the programs want to make sure that you're actually a successful PA student for a number of reasons. Obviously, to help you, in your career and graduate the program, but also so that the program can maintain its, standards and pass rates and things of that nature. So, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. You definitely are well versed in this, and the ideal candidate to me is not somebody who came across the U.S. News and World Report article a week ago, right?
Yeah.
Who said, "Oh, what is this? This sounds really
Right.
cool. Let me figure this out." So. You're right. There are two very important components, I think, to a PA applicant. Number one is how are they going to do in the program? A program wants to accept folks who are going to be successful. It's a win-win situation. Of course, you want that person to be successful and to go through the program, but also the program wants the students to be successful. It reflects positively on the program. So you obviously are looking for folks who will academically do well in the program, but also I always looked at folks. These are my future colleagues. What does that look like, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
who do you want to work next to? Who's going to represent this profession? You mentioned that I've been in this game a long time. It's my 24th year. What's phenomenal to me is this explosion of social media and folks like you that are doing really great things to promote the profession and attract and bring great people to the profession, because that's going to predict our success as a
Mhm.
profession going forward. It's people that are continuing to represent us so well. So that's what you
Mhm.
want is these people
Right.
who are going to carry the torch and bring it forth. And there's so much more than just we're trained as clinicians. I get that. And that's how the curriculum's designed and set up, but there's so much more to our success than that, right? And it's people getting involved in leadership. It's people getting involved with awareness. It's people getting involved in promotion and all of those things. So you look for those characteristics as well, right? And the applicant pool, believe it or not, is so much different than it was 25 years ago, like where people had a little bit more life experience. They were successful in a given profession already, whether they were a healthcare provider, a nurse, a therapist, or whatever, a medic. Now the average applicant is a lot younger. So those real world
Hmm.
experiences are yet to be appreciated. So you're looking for that potential as opposed to maybe somebody who has been in the real world for 10, 15 years in a career already. So if it comes down to two things, I think, Michelle, number one is your academic capability and aptitude, and number two is what do you bring to the profession going forward?
Yeah, that's great. And, I think people will say, well, I struggled my first year of college, but since then I've done really well. And, I think that I want to believe that programs will see that, right? So if it was, sort of a short-term problem that has now shown its growth, you're you are going to be able to handle the harder courses. You are going to be, but you're also, you know, you know what a PA is and does. Some people, one of the questions I ask sometimes is, explain to me what a PA is. And people who struggle to answer that question makes me, obviously concerned about what that means, for them as an applicant and going forward. So knowing what it means to be a PA, and I think that's the value of getting hands-on patient experience before you apply, because thinking you want to work in medicine and actually working in medicine are two completely different things. And so I know that, yes, a lot of programs require a certain number of hours. The average applicant has 2,000, something like that, but there's a reason for that. And, it's really to make sure that people are ready and this is really something that they're going to want to do and they're going to want to be in this profession, long term. Um, and then the other thing you mentioned is sort of the age of applicants. And that's a question I get a lot too is, am I too old or am I too young? And my answer to them is if you're ready, you're ready.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't matter how old you are. Like I have worked with young applicants that I'm like, who's your mom? I want to meet them. Like you are like outstanding leadership, lots of hours, know exactly what they're doing. And they're going right from undergrad. But it's hard to explain what that is, right? They have a maturity about them. They have I feel like they're going to grow so well into the profession. Whereas sort of older applicants have so much stuff to bring to the table, life experience and things like that. Like if you're ready, you're ready. Doesn't matter
I
how old you are.
I love the dynamic of having that learner in the program who has that real life experience. It rounds out your class really nicely.
Yes.
There's so much that can
Yeah.
be gained and gleaned by the younger students in the program too, by having that well-rounded class. We just talked about averages. Yes, you're right. The average age is younger, but every program is going to have folks in their 30s,
Yes.
40s, 50s in a program and enrolled in a program. I loved all the applicants that came to the table, and each brought their own, I think, skill set. But I think back to when I was this 23-year-old student, I did a rotation with my classmate Paul. I'll never forget. Paul was in his mid 50s. He had been a high school administrator for like a 25-year career, and then just, hey, in my twilight, I always wanted to be a doctor. I never did it 30 years ago, but now's my chance with this
Hmm.
profession. He spent 5 years retaking classes, getting healthcare experience. Paul, to this day, is somebody, he's well in his 70s now, that I still love to connect with, who to me was so influential when I was a
Hmm.
student in the program. So you're right. You're never too young. You're never too old to apply
Yeah.
to a career program.
And yeah, it's so funny too because I have very opposite ends of the spectrum where the younger applicants are feeling pressure from their parents to apply and get in and delaying the start of their career. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my God, you're 20, 1 years old, you could practice for 40 years. And on the other hand, I have older applicants who say, I don't know. I feel like, am I too old for it? Am I just too late? And I'm like, if you finish a PA program by the time you're 42, you're still going to practice for 25 years. There's a very different time perspective when you kind of think about it in that way. And I think I've had so many people who are students tell me that having the older people in their program has been so influential on them. And so I think that, it's really important to have a very balanced, mixed class.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it speaks to our profession too, once you get out in the profession and what each person can bring to that as well. So, it's very interesting looking at the evolution. We kind of started this conversation as kind of, the entry point into the profession, but now we're really starting to touch on what really rounds out the profession nicely. It's really interesting times. It's really been interesting to watch this. I had no idea back in the 90s, like what my career path would look like. But it's
Me
been
neither.
exciting,
Yeah.
right? It's been exciting to watch the evolution of our profession.
Some people have asked me, do you ever regret not going to medical school, or, did you think you'd be doing this? No to both.
Right. Right.
But at the same time, this profession has taken me to places I've never thought that I would go, or to do things I never thought that I would do. And the opportunities, are there. So you have done many different things. So obviously you've been on, the educational side. But now, I mean, you run a clinic, you're on an administrative side. So what has been sort of what are some of the opportunities that you've gotten that you felt like you never thought maybe would as a PA? Because I think
Yes.
people are like, you can't do that as a PA. I'm like, well, I don't know about that.
So funny story. I told you about the critical hospital I worked at as I came out. The first day me and Robert showed up to work, Robert was my classmate and my colleague who was going to come in. We were the first PAs to work at this. It was a 15-bed hospital,
Wow.
and when we got there, someone realized that the bylaws at the hospital did not include practice privileges for PAs, something that might have been wanted to sort out before we got there.
Yes.
We spent our first 2 weeks sidelined as like the medical executive committee of this hospital tried to figure this out. It was a little bit of an oversight, we'll call it. So that's how my career started off. It was a bumpy little start. And,
Yeah.
I've always been by default, a trailblazer. We were the first PAs at this hospital. I took a moonlighting job up the road closer to Atlanta at more of a busier emergency room. I was the first PA to work in that emergency department, working the first shift. When I got into being a program director and PA faculty at a relatively new program up here in Maine, starting to push that agenda, but that got me involved with the Board of Licensure in Medicine here in Maine. I chaired the PA advisory committee for a while, and we helped
Wow.
put a permanent PA on the true board of the Board of Licensure, which was the first time. As of March of last year, LD 1660 here in Maine allows PA more autonomous practice here in the state of Maine. We don't have to have a supervising physician anymore if we have, 2,000 or 4,000 hours of healthcare experience. So being able to help drive some of that new legislation, it's been really kind of fun to be part of that. I also sit on the board of trustees at my hospital. I'm the first PA to sit on the board of trustees.
That's awesome.
I was nominated, funny story, I was nominated to be the chair of the medical executive committee at my hospital. I lost by like 2 votes, but just to be considered, to be respected in my role at the hospital, to be nominated and then garner that many votes. Listen, it sounded like a nightmare of a job, so I'm glad I didn't get it. But I think the point is this isn't self-promotion. This is really me saying that the sky is the limit with this
Yes.
profession, and you can do whatever you want to do with this. Don't allow yourself to be told, no, PAs don't do that, or PAs can't do that. Ask yourself, well, why is that? And be the agent of change. That's what this has allowed me to do.
Yeah.
So I've just been lucky enough to be surrounded by supportive people. But when you don't get the answer that you think is correct or right, just kind of keep pushing forward. There's so much opportunity to be gained out there that our profession has prepared us well to be leaders, not in just the profession, but in healthcare systems
Yeah.
and experiences. It's just, don't be defined by whatever letters are after your name or whatever. I think I'm respected because of who I am, not because I'm a PA per se. I think it's you just go out there and you just prove your value and you prove your worth.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess that would be my message to your listeners is
Yeah.
there's nothing special about me. I just kept going. I just kept going forward
Yeah.
and just move
Well, and
ahead.
I think you bring up a good point, and I said this on my stories last week when somebody told me I couldn't do something. You can't sign this for. I said, well, why?
Yeah.
Because, never take like, you can't do this without really kind of digging in to why somebody is telling you you can't do that. So like you said, like the bylaws, I was like, they're like, well, it's the policy. I'm like, can I see the policy? Like, I want to see the policy and I want to see what it says, because, and that is something I have learned to do over time, that I hope to empower students to, and graduates to say, I want to know, why you're telling me I can't do this, right? Like, what needs to be changed. I've done that similar to you at other jobs where I'm like, no, this is how I'm supposed to practice. This is how I'm supposed. I don't. I'm not somebody like, I'm not going to go see the patient and then you're going to go see the patient. That is not how, we're going to practice. And those are conversations that I had to have. A lot of that education and having to do that allowed me to grow and allowed me to gain respect from, my colleagues and physicians and administration and things like that. And I think that's what you've done too. I think what you said too is really important about your state, because to listeners out there, PA legislation is different in every state. And the way that you can help initiate change is by getting involved in your state organization. This really starts at the state level. And Maine and now Utah has, that just came out in the news recently that, you can have independent practice after a certain amount of hours, but this is really, healthcare is a team effort. And if you want to grow as a professional, as a person, people will recognize that, just like they've recognized, Erich, and not, setting limits on themselves, which is amazing.
And
So
yeah, I want to point something out as we talk about this. I am so proud of the PA profession, what it stands for. I've never made it a goal to be, I'm not looking to be a physician. I'm not looking to hang my own shingle and that sort of thing. I know my value to my organization, to my patients and all
mhm.
that. So I run this service line of our urgent care, and we have 5 of them kind of throughout Southern Maine. And prior,
Yeah.
with the legislation the way it was, we had a medical director who was the medical director, and all these PAs that I managed had to go under this one physician's license. He was the supervising doc, and
Mhm.
Dr. Hulefeld was awesome, and he's great and all that. But we talk about this all the time. It's like, Erich, this is kind of crazy when you think about it. These 18, 16 PAs, and again, every state's different. Some states allow a supervising doc to have only so many PAs under them. Maine, it didn't have a limitation. But the point was, it just felt an antiquated kind of, I have a quality initiative system as part of my urgent care. Like, I have these quality metrics and checks, and we're looking at the performance of how we practice and what
Mhm.
we do and our outcomes and all that. Like, those are all important, and that's part of my system. I'm not looking to set up all these rogue clinics with these,
Yeah.
with these PAs just doing whatever they want. That's not it. We got rid of some of the administrative red tape and stuff that made it just
Mhm.
tricky and difficult and whatnot. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. I'm not looking to.
Yeah.
I want to. I want to augment our ability to deliver great care as PAs.
Yeah.
In our
And I
role.
think that's an important point, because we're not trying to be doctors. We're
No.
just trying to be the best of our profession.
That's right. That's right.
And, that includes things in clinical medicine and outside of clinical medicine. So, um, and so I think that, people like you are really have pushed this profession forward and will continue to do so. So I really appreciate your time and for you talking to us. Any final comments or anecdotes you want to leave the audience with?
Well, first of all, if you're listening to this, you're obviously interested in the profession, and I applaud you for that. Or you're well on your way or in your path. I think I think it's a very exciting time. I encourage you to continue to pursue this. There is so much opportunity, I think, going forward. We started off this conversation a little bit about saturation and whatnot. I think on the other part of that argument, we are getting into an older population growth.
Mhm.
There is healthcare providers who are coming to the end of their career, so there seems to be some predictive gaps in primary care coverage and whatnot coverage. We can take an important role in all of that. I think the other thing I would leave, other pearls or wisdom is it is a competitive profession. Continue to work hard. Continue to seek those opportunities that make you a better candidate, that make you a stronger academic foundation, all of those things. But basically, congratulations. I think it's an exciting career to pursue. I, like you, have zero regrets about it. I feel incredibly lucky to have stumbled across this thing 25
Yeah.
plus years ago.
Yeah, I agree. And, I had a similar experience where, I didn't know this is what I wanted to do. I was out of college, before I decided. And a lot of people, that's the case. And so don't be discouraged if you didn't know your whole life, you wanted to go into medicine. And so really the sky is the limit if you're willing to put in the work and, learn and grow, within the profession. So, thank you so much for being here. And where can people contact you if they want to had a question or something like that?
Yeah, sure. I think what we'll do with your show notes, we can certainly put out some contact information, kind of, as you promote this. And the other thing I'll say about that, Michelle, too, is congratulations, to you and people like you in the profession who continue to want to help and support others on this path. I think the work you do is phenomenal, and as you know, and your readers know, I merely stumbled across you on social media and was so
Yeah.
intrigued by the work that you're doing, and applaud you. I think it's fantastic. This is what gives me great pride as a PA is this is who we are, right, as a profession, and
Yeah.
this is kind of the work that we do. So I know there's folks out there that really have a strong social media presence, and it's, as someone who's been in the profession a long time and looking at that, it just gives you a great sense of pride. So
Yeah, and I thank you. I really appreciate that. It's really nice and very kind. And it's what I'm realizing is that the more I do this and the more I enjoy it, the more my purpose is to give back to the profession, in many ways. And so it's just fueled me more to want to not only help those on their pathway to being PAs, but give back to my profession in ways that I don't know that I would have thought of before. So I appreciate that.
Yep. And opportunity begets opportunity. That's another thing about
Yeah.
our profession, right? The more you do and the more you get in, the more things come, present to you. So keep up the great work. And I really appreciate the invite, and I'm honored to be here.
Awesome. All right, you guys, listen, the show notes will be on my website in the upcoming weeks, so be sure to check that out. And thank you guys so much for being here and listening. You can always drop me a comment. You can find me on all social media platforms at michelle.theposhba. Thanks, guys.